Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Anya Volkov, a discreet woman in her 30s, was known in Cape Konig for his impeccable professionalism and quiet kindness. Located in the heart of Berlin, between art galleries and corporate headquarters, this cafe with gilded moldings and green velvet banquettes welcomed a refined clientele every day. Diplomats, artists, a few aging celebrities, and many businessmen in dark suits. For 5 years, Anya had blended in perfectly. She smiled, memorized orders, anticipated requests. Her very slight Russian accent added to her charm. But no one knew who she really was. Behind that smiling mask, Anya carried an ancient, almost frozen pain. Originally from Moscow, she had fled Russia at the age of 25, leaving behind a past too heavy to bear. A childhood filled with waiting, silence, shifty glances, and above all, an absence that had never been explained. His mother, Irina Volkov, had disappeared without a word when Anya was only 10 years old. One day, she was there, stroking his hair in the small kitchen of their Moscow apartment. The next day, she had simply disappeared. Neither the authorities, nor the neighbors, nor even the meager searches of her alcoholic father had been able to understand what had happened. The case was covered up, then forgotten. For years, Anya had tried to reconstruct her mother's face from hazy memories. A soft laugh, a voice that hummed lullabies, the smell of honey soap. But over time, these fragments had faded, and Anya had learned to live without them. That morning, Berlin was bathed in a pale autumn light. Orange leaves were slowly falling onto the damp pavement, and a fine mist enveloped the windows of Cape Konig. Anya, as always, had arrived before opening. She had arranged the chairs, checked the cups, adjusted the lights so they were soft but warm, as her Klein, the cafe's owner, liked to say. At 9 o'clock sharp, the first customers walked through the door. Anya's movements were automatic, precise, elegant. But at 9:23, something changed. A man entered. He was alone, tall, straight as a soldier, a stern man in his 50s. His graying hair was neatly combed, and he wore a long black coat with a raised collar. His boots clicked softly on the wooden floor. He surveyed the room with a calm, sure gaze and went to sit in a discreet corner near the bay window. Anya noticed at once. There was a restrained tension about him, an air of absolute control, as if everything he did, down to the slightest movement of his hand, was calculated. She approached with her notebook, as usual. "Good morning. What can I get you?" she asked politely. He looked up. His irises were a steely blue, almost icy, but they softened at the sight of Anya. "A black coffee. No sugar," he replied in a calm voice. He then took an aged leather wallet out of his inside pocket and placed it on the table, right next to a small notebook. Half an hour later, while he was outside to take a call, Anya walked by his table to clean it up. With a banal gesture, she moved the empty cup. The wallet slipped and fell to the floor with a dull thud. She bent down to pick it up, and what she saw froze her. The leather had opened slightly from the shock, revealing an interior compartment. Inside, tucked into a transparent sleeve, was an old, slightly crumpled black and white photograph. She recognized her immediately. This woman, this face. His legs buckled. It was Irina Volkov's mother. Younger, with long hair down, a sweet smile, frozen in a moment of eternity. She wore a simple coat, typical of the 80s, and was huddled against a man. A man who looked awfully like he had just ordered a black coffee, without sugar. Anya's breath caught. Her fingers were shaking. She clutched the wallet to her chest, tears welling up in her eyes. Questions flooded her. Why did this man have this photo? Who was he to her mother? Was he her lover? Her jailer? Her savior? Or worse yet, her torturer? When Friedrich Weber returned to his table a few minutes later, Anya was still there, staring blankly, as if she had just seen a ghost. The night after discovering the photo was a whirlwind of anxiety for Anya. She barely slept. Blurry images, fragments of memories, and above all, the frozen silhouette of Friedrich with his mother's face pressed against him, haunted her. In the early morning, she returned to work as usual, but her heart was in turmoil. She knew he would return. This kind of man did not come to Cape Konig by chance. She felt it now. His presence, his almost paternal gaze, were not insignificant. At 10 o'clock he came in. He saw her at once, and, as if he felt that the moment would be different, he did not sit down. He waited for her to come to him. She took a deep breath, then stepped toward him. They exchanged a few formal words over a coffee they had ordered automatically. Then Anya lowered her voice and said firmly, "I need to talk to you. Now." Friedrich Weber seemed surprised, but he nodded gravely, almost relieved. He followed Anya into the back room of the cafe, where the staff rarely went. A small, cramped room, its walls covered with old photographs of Berlin, a discreet place, almost timeless. Anya closed the door, and without preamble, "Why do you have a picture of my mother?" she asked in Russian. Friedrich turned pale. Then he replied in almost flawless Russian, though marked by a German accent. "Because I loved her, and because she asked me to watch over you." The silence that followed was so deep that Anya's heartbeat could have been heard. He sat down slowly on a wooden chair. His face, usually so controlled, looked older, worn. "Your name is Anya Volkov. You were born in Moscow. Your mother, Irina, was one of the bravest women I have ever known. She wrote poetry and forbidden essays. She translated clandestine texts, speeches by Sakharov and Solzhenitsyn. She was part of an intellectual circle monitored by the KGB." He paused, looked Anya straight in the eyes. "I was a young lawyer in West Berlin. My firm defended artists and dissidents who had managed to escape. That's how I met Irina. She had managed to cross the border in 1986 with false papers. She was broken, suspicious, but so quick-witted. We fell in love. In secret." Anya sat silently. Her hands were shaking slightly. "She left you in Russia because she thought she could bring you back later. But the authorities figured out where she was. In 1988, they arrested me a few hours after a meeting with her. I was detained and interrogated. When I got out, she had disappeared. She had been forced to return to Russia. I was told that if I tried to see her again, I would be expelled from my own country." Friedrich then took the photo out of his wallet. He gently handed it to Anya. "She left me this photo just before she left. She said to me, 'Protect my daughter if I don't come back.'" A sob rose in Anya's throat. She clutched the photo to her chest like a lost talisman found too late. "But why didn't you ever approach me? Why didn't you tell me anything?" she asked, her voice breaking. Friedrich let out a remorseful sigh. "Because you'd already been through too much upheaval. When you arrived in Berlin, I knew. I looked for you discreetly, and I learned you were working here. But I didn't want to impose myself. I didn't want you to think I was coming to replace a missing mother with an explanation that came too late." He lowered his head, then whispered, "And I was afraid you would hate me." Anya's tears flowed freely now. But it wasn't just grief. It was also immense relief, that of no longer being abandoned, of no longer being the forgotten child of a mother who had vanished into indifference. "You say she might still be alive?" Friedrich nodded. 5 years ago, I received an anonymous letter. Handwritten. It spoke of a woman being held in a recreational dacha in the Vladimir region, under surveillance. Not a prisoner, but not free either. A kind of internal exile. Nothing official. Everything in the shadows. I tried to track her down, but my contacts are limited." He took a copy of the letter, yellowed by time, out of his pocket and handed it to Anya. She read it silently. The words were simple, almost coded. But there was one sentence that struck her right in the heart. She often talks about Anya. She thinks she's safe in the West. A new determination formed in Anya's eyes. I'm going to find my mother. I have to tell her that I love her, that she didn't abandon me for nothing." Friedrich placed a trembling hand on hers. "If you leave, I'm coming with you." The day after their shocking exchange, Anya and Friedrich set about a task both arduous and uncertain: finding Irina. They knew the path would be fraught with pitfalls, and that the silence of the past would not be broken easily. But for Anya, there was no longer any question of living in the shadow of doubt. The first shock was administrative. By consulting the official Russian records, Friedrich discovered that Anya's name had been in civil status databases, as if she had never existed, as if she had been deliberately erased from history. It was a hard blow, a form of symbolic erasure that resonated like a second abandonment. But very quickly, Friedrich understood what it really meant. "It's her," he said one evening, closing an old file. "Your mother. She did this. She made you disappear from the Russian system to protect you, so they couldn't find you, monitor you, or use you against her." Anya remained silent for a long time. This gesture, which she had initially interpreted as betrayal, turned out to be a desperate act of love, a last-ditch attempt to sever the bond in the eyes of the authorities while preserving it in her heart. Months of research, legal proceedings, and sleepless nights ensued. Friedrich mobilized his old network, human rights lawyers, former Russian dissidents now refugees in Germany, and archivists familiar with the KGB's secret practices. Anya met men and women marked by their clandestine existence, writers in exile, banished teachers, mothers separated from their children. Each testimony was a lesson in courage and resilience, and in each face, she found a little of herself, a little of her mother. She learned that in the 1990s, after the fall of the Soviet Union, Irina had been briefly located in Moscow, then transferred to a remote region, under the pretext of extended therapeutic rest. But behind these medical words lay a form of house arrest, a gentle but constant surveillance, orchestrated by a state that, even weakened, had not forgotten its former enemies. Anya began to write letters to embassies, emails to NGOs, personal messages to journalists specializing in the forgotten affairs of the Cold War. Every word she wrote brought her closer to her mother. Every silence she encountered fueled her determination. And then there was the wait. Weeks passed. The winter cold fell on Berlin. Café Koenig, adorned with Christmas garlands, continued to spin. Anya, as always, served customers with grace. But something had changed. A new light shone in her eyes. She belonged to another time and another struggle, even amidst the laughter and the clinking of cups. Then one freezing morning, as she was cleaning the counter before service, her phone vibrated. Unknown number. Russian code. She hesitated to answer, breathless. Then, with a trembling hand, she slid her finger across the screen. Hello? A silence. Then a voice. Faint, hoarse, but unmistakable. Anya, it's Mom. The world stopped. Anya felt her legs give way. She leaned against the wall, her hand over her mouth, unable to answer right away. The tears flowed freely, hot, abundant, and for the first time in a long time, they weren't not tears of pain, but of recognition, of relief, of rebirth. She whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. Mom, Mom, I've been looking for you all my life. On the other end of the line, a sob. Then a response, as sweet as a forgotten lullaby. And I protected you, all mine.